So I guess you could say, I mean, I know you could say that's the UN working. It's like pulling teeth, but like, it's strange how, again, it's just sort of there are some situations in which the Council just like micromanages, and then there's some that are just, I mean, just look, yesterday there were these Tibetans across this First Avenue all day chanting, wake up, Ban Ki-moon, and trying to get their issue. And as we probably both know, that issue will never make it to the Council. It's not even, I mean, no one even,
Yeah.
because of the
But I guess it is kind of interesting to see sort of which are micromanaged. What is it about Sri Lanka, you think, that makes it less sort of receptive to this sort of micromanagement? That and when we say micromanagement, we mean issues, say like Burma, where there's like a special UN envoy, and I'm sure we'll get to Myanmar later. What makes the difference is the fact that Myanmar is so internationally isolated that it there's room for sort of the UN to be speaking as sort of one voice.
Right, and that is actually, I mean, it's a very good question. I mean, I think first of all, I will say, because I'm sure the Sri Lankan government would say it. Number one, Sri Lanka is a democracy. It's a democracy that's having some problems treating its minorities, in an appropriate way. But it is, I guess, they would say that to analogize them to a military junta is not the case. I also think, I mean, obviously, in the case of Burma/Myanmar, the U.S. and the U.K. and France are this is one of their sort of poster children of human rights abuse, probably for good reason.
Yeah.
But so you have 3 permanent members of the Security Council that have been for a long time calling for action. You know what I mean? I mean, if you wanted to even personalize it more, some people are saying, I've heard a lot now with the change from Bush to Obama and a recent meeting that was held here on Myanmar, that like Laura Bush was it's not her sort of personal. Either you can say like crusade, or some on the other side would say like vendetta. But her personal interest in Burma and Aung San Suu Kyi made it a high-profile issue of U.S. foreign policy, higher than it would have been. And I think that there's now
so maybe the answer to the question here, and this is something I think I probably agree with, is that sort of what makes the difference is when a powerful country like the United States wants to make it a big issue, but doesn't want to touch it directly, so they try to work through the UN to, as you say, micromanage.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to say. Yeah,
at least here. Yeah. No, I'm just like hypothesizing.
Sure. No, I think you're right.
At least sort of in the Sri Lanka case, there doesn't seem to be much of a sort of American stake.
No, definitely.
In it.
No, and I think there's also the U.S. is because I think various people have said this, like 9/11 really didn't help the Tamil Tiger cause. Let's put it that way, in the sense of like they had always been viewed as a sort of like particularly vicious, but very much as a kind of like a separatist or national, whatever you want to call it, national defense, national liberation movement. But right after 9/11, that technique was totally, it made it the U.S. They're willing to be. The U.S. is willing to be sort of hypocritical on, like, for example, the guy that blew up some Cuban planes. Remember this one? This is an ongoing issue. But they're willing. I mean, they're willing to sort of bite the bullet and be involved in double standards on that one. But they're not going to defend a sort of an extraneous. It's not like they support even the Tamil Tigers' goals, and so they've very much put them on a list. And every time the U.S., even in the course, the timing was very strange, but in the course of this assault, we're really, I think, like objectively, the focus is supposed to be on the civilians. The U.S. made some additional, additions to the Tamil Tigers sanctions list, which the government made much of. I mean, the government of Sri Lanka is constantly pointing to the U.S. Characterization of the Tamil Tigers as justifying everything that they do there. So you're absolutely right. There's that, and I think in this one, like the UK, during the course of these 6 weeks, has probably been out. It had to be out in front, and I think it's been sort of kicking and screaming. But there are a lot of Tamils in the UK, and so they've been in response to some degree to those protests. They've tried to. They've been the one. They also. I don't know if we said this last time. The UK appointed or tried to appoint a special envoy, their own special envoy to Sri Lanka, Des Brown, former defense minister. Sri Lanka refused to let him in, barred him from going in. So that's and the UK. But what's interesting is their approach to Sri Lanka is decidedly different than to, for example, Myanmar. On Myanmar, they'll say, we condemn the military junta. Tan Shui release political prisoners. And in this, it's like Sri Lanka said to them, "You're a bunch of colonialists. Don't send an envoy." And they said publicly, "We're trying to work through this." You know. So they do, you know. In any case, but I think you're right. I think we can zero that. It also takes a. No, I think it is. That's exactly what it is. It takes one or more, probably more than one, ideally, P5 country wanting to make it an issue, which in turn, because I mean, yeah. So Russia backed up Sri Lanka, and I'm sure China would if push came to shove. But they are both in the same relation to, Myanmar and Zimbabwe in a sense, you know. But they were willing to. They stepped back. Well, here's the interesting thing. Like on Zimbabwe, they stepped back to allow it to get onto the Council's agenda for humanitarian reasons. But when the sanctions came forward, they both vetoed it. And no one has even really tried. With Myanmar, there's EU sanctions and U.S. sanctions, but there's no like UN sanctions on Myanmar.
So Matthew, last time we talked, you sort of brought up how you're sort of exasperated that sort of activist groups did not sort of make Sri Lanka as big of an issue as, say, they make with like Darfur or with other sort of humanitarian crises. And I know that sort of you received, I don't want to call it pushback, but some of these groups sort of, I think, constructively engaged with you on this.
Some engagement. You
want to talk?
No, sure. And I think, and I don't want to be too inside baseball, but I know that you bridge these the two sides of this. But I mean, I think the Enough Project, their response, it was just because you'd mentioned them. I didn't mean to single them out as the one and only,
of course.
sort of Africa only.
And
NGO.
you say, like, we'll post a link to the Enough Project's response.
Right. The response is that
they wrote that,
Right.
I'm looking at it now. It said sort of the reason that Enough has not taken on Sri Lanka to date is a practical operational issue rather than any kind of value judgment. And they go on to say, they're a very new organization. But it's the response is well worth a read. And I wanted to know sort of, have you, Matthew, like, have they reached out to you personally? Not the Enough, but I know sort of GI.
No, sure, and I think the GI net is much more. They say they have a global scope and that they're willing to. I mean, my whole thought on this was just that. I'll back into it this way, but in sort of. Another human rights paragon came to the UN, I believe last Friday. Mary Robinson, right? She was here for some other purpose, but she did a press conference. So I asked her, like,
former top human rights official at the UN.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I asked her, what's your view? Did you work on this issue when you were Human Rights Commissioner? And what's your view of the current events in Sri Lanka? And she said it's outrageous, and that she tried to work on it, but it's her belief that the government of Sri Lanka has sort of convinced people that they're almost about to wipe out the Tamil Tigers, so sort of just let them do it. But then she said, she made this analogy. This was the connection. She said, it's not dissimilar to the situations in the DRC or in Darfur. She made that analogy, and I would say a major difference is the other two are very much on the agenda of the Security Council and are, if we'll use the word micromanagement, I mean, right, they're anytime something happens these days in Darfur, there will be a meeting of the council convened, and there will be an attempt to put out a press statement, you know what I mean, saying the government should hold back of Muhajiria or whatever it is. Same thing on DRC. I mean, so, which is, I mean, I guess that's as it should be. If the Security Council is supposed to be addressing these not just threats to international peace and security, but humanitarian crises caused by armed conflict,